Chapter 81, SSS Grade Talent 1. I frowned at Yu Jonghyuk's words. Move to the east right now. I saved his life and now he was giving me an order. I was a bit annoyed, but Yu Jonghyuk spoke before I could say anything. The disaster of questions is waking up. What? I was frustrated because I couldn't understand what he was saying, and Yu Jonghyuk frowned. Someone is waking the disaster up. After a while, Han Soo-young and I left Laikyan, who was still receiving enlightenment, and headed for Gangdong-gu. It was at a tremendous pace. Can we just leave that wolf? The immunter can feel the master of the medallion. He will come find us when he wakes up. Rather, I looked at Han Soo-young running beside me and said, "Can't you carry him? You can use your avatar." "I don't want to." The disgusted Han Soo-young quickly moved away from me. "Didn't you say earlier that Yu Jonghyuk might not be a bad guy?" "That is that and this is this. Isn't he the one who cut my head off?" I couldn't say anything to refute her words. Yu Jonghyuk spoke through midday tryst. "You can leave me, I don't need help." "Don't be so prideful, I really will abandon you." I couldn't see Yu Jonghyuk's face, because he was being carried on my back. "When will you be able to move by yourself?" "In 2 days." "Will you kill me when you recover?" I asked half-jokingly, but this bastard didn't give an answer. I deliberately reduced the pace at which I was moving. "Then I can't help you. How can I believe a guy who is trying to kill me? I will help you if you swear an oath of existence. Swear not to kill me until the end of this regression." "I can't do that." "Lousy bastard." "Then swear you won't hurt me until the 5th scenario is over. If you can't do that, I really won't help you." Yu Jonghyuk thought for a moment before replying. "I swear." Surprisingly, Yu Jonghyuk agreed to the oath of existence. It was a constraint on the person who swore it. A cold flame emerged from Yu Jonghyuk's body and dug into his heart. If he broke the oath, this blue flames will burn his heart. I felt a bit relieved, but then Yu Jonghyuk continued. "I won't kill you, but I will hit you once." "What?" I was dazed for a moment. He was going to hit me. "Is this because of 2 days ago?" Yu Jonghyuk didn't answer again. I thought it was strange that Yu Jonghyuk agreed to the oath so easily. "It is 1 hit. I'll do it gently, understood?" Yes, it might not be bad if 1 hit could restore my relationship with Yu Jonghyuk. In my current state, I wouldn't die from one of Yu Jonghyuk's blows. Shortly after that, we crossed Cheongdam Bridge and entered Gwangjinggu. I felt the surrounding ecology change little by little. Grass was growing on the streets, and instead of rotting bodies, the smell of monster feces filled the area. The trunk of a huge plant emerged from the ground and wrapped around the surrounding high-rise buildings. The 7th-grade plant species, Yannispleta, is on the lookout. I spoke to Han Soo-young, who was pulling out a weapon. "Don't act so rashly. It is fine as long as we don't attack first. Don't these type of monsters suddenly attack with tentacles? That is just in the manhwas. They are gentle, just be careful not to step on the roots." At the top of the building, the head of the plant that resembled a sunflower followed after us with its eyes. It seemed scary, but it was actually a good monster. This didn't mean that the situation was optimistic. The plant species originally came after the Great Hall was fully opened. The terraforming has started. Terraforming. The 5th scenario was world versus world. Humanity fought against the worlds that were coming. Just like Seoul was suffering from the erosion of Chronos, China would be facing the 3rd Murim world, while Japan would be facing the White Demon world. Han Soo-young scouted around with avatars and said, "It is a monster colony, damn. The terraforming will be even faster if the disasters awaken." "What type of person is waking up the disaster?" "A person like you. You woke up the fire dragon." Han Soo-young bit her lips. "Didn't you tidy it up?" At that time, the intermediate Dakibai placed a penalty on the fire dragon. "And what if I didn't kill it? Don't tell me that you would catch it." "There was a penalty. Then didn't it benefit us to catch a weakened disaster?" The disaster of questions has no penalty. It is questionable if the Dakibai would even place a penalty on it. We moved quickly to avoid the monster's colony. In the streets, the ground rats and grolls were eating corpses. Looking at the traces of the destroyed monsters, Yu Jonghyuk seemed to have come through this path. Yu Jonghyuk was great to walk so far in this physical condition. I spoke to Yu Jonghyuk. I have a question. What? Come to me. I honestly thought you would commit suicide. Suicide? How ridiculous. If he had seen his future in the 8th turn, he wouldn't be able to say this. I was a bit confused by his next words. If I was going to give up so easily, I wouldn't have started this journey. It really felt like the first time I read Ways of Survival. I thought that maybe Han Soo-young was right. The Yu Jonghyuk I believed I knew was the Yu Jonghyuk who easily gave up, easily killed people, and repeatedly caused numerous tragedies. However, the Yu Jonghyuk of the 3rd round wasn't yet like that. Maybe I didn't know the Yu Jonghyuk of the 3rd round. Your understanding of the character Yu Jonghyuk is increasing. In the meantime, Yu Jonghyuk said, I thought of you right away. I thought you would be a bit of help since you are the one who smashed the absolute throne. You aren't going to say anything about me breaking the throne. I don't want to talk about what already happened. In addition, I thought about it. You must have done it to rule out the god of the other world. You know, I was honestly frightened because I had never really spoken to Yu Jonghyuk before. Putting aside his coolness, this bastard had such a great mind. Yu Jonghyuk kept speaking. Honestly, I think it isn't a bad way. The problem is what happens next. After you crushed the throne, the guides were scattered and there was a setback in collecting the meteorite. This is why the terraforming of Gwangjinggu and Gangdonggu is so fast. The Wanderers are using the power of the meteorites. What do you mean? Terraforming won't accelerate simply by using the meteorites. One of the 10 evils has taken possession of a disaster meteorite. The 10 evils. My heart instantly sank. I had expected it, but actually hearing it was a different matter. Is it the poisoner? You know, she is the only one who uses Thousand Spirits poison. But there was still a part that I didn't understand. Then why are you poisoned? If you knew that the opponent was the poisoner, shouldn't you have avoided facing her from the front? I was trying to convince her. Convince you? Then a scene belatedly popped up. Yu Jonghyuk said, I wanted to make her a companion. Companion, I see. I remembered now. Poisoner Lee Xiaohua was Yu Jonghyuk's companion in the 2nd round. The 10 evils weren't always opponents. Just like armed fortress master Gong Pildu changed in this round, Lee Xiaohua was transformed into a companion in several rounds, including the first regression. In all other regressions so far, Poisoner Lee Xiaohua was one of the few companions that Yu Jonghyuk could rely on. You did something that is like you. I admitted I was pathetic. What? She isn't the person I remember. I knew it. Still, I wanted to believe for a moment that the woman in my memories was still alive. I wanted to be with her again. I couldn't help opening my mouth at the loneliness that he had buried deeply. In his 2nd life, Lee Xiaohua didn't last long, but she was Yu Jonghyuk's lover. I understand. Yu Jonghyuk was silent for a moment. You are talking as if you have regressed before. I don't need to regress to understand. I knew that I shouldn't speak about understanding. Still, I wanted to say it. Since he wouldn't receive understanding from anyone in the future, I thought I could say this. The character Yu Jonghyuk is deeply shaken. The character Yu Jonghyuk has received a faint consolation. Strange, you obviously aren't a regressor, but I feel like you really understand these emotions. Is this also the power of a prophet? I didn't answer, making Yu Jonghyuk continue speaking. Of course, you aren't a good person. You are the unscrupulous person who kidnapped my sister. When did I kidnap her? I just protected her. You must have understood with lie detection. Kim Dokja. We stopped talking at Han Soo-young's tense voice. The road from Chinho Bridge to Gangdong was visible. The Great Hall emitted a bright light and something fell towards Gangdonggu. Damn it, it was already happening. We fully entered Gangdong-gu, and the density of the strange grasses covering the ground increased. Dirty trees grew between buildings, and there were small beasts running on the trees. Gangdong-gu was already half of another world. Han Soo-young bit her lips and asked, "Are we too late? What if the disaster has already awakened?" "It hasn't happened yet. Then we would have received the scenario." We took a few more steps and saw several markings on the ground. It looked like graffiti, but it was actually a territorial display. It was a warning that no one should enter. From here on, it was the area of the poisoner. Like the other wanderers, she settled in Gangdong-gu and started to expand her base. The progress was faster than I expected. Han Soo-young said, "If this group is well guarded, it won't be easy to attack. Have you thought of something?" "No, I didn't intend to wage an all-out war in the first place. We only need the meteorite. We can just steal it. I will buy time while you take the meteorite." However, it wouldn't be so easy. The story might be different if I had an assistant like the Wanderer King. Yu Jonghyuk interrupted. "There is no need to rush. Even if the disaster begins, the disaster of questions is a disaster that can be suppressed at an early stage." An early suppression. Indeed, it was possible for Yu Jonghyuk. Early suppression, who will do that? Are you a half-god? Of course it should be you. Weren't you thinking about it anyway? Why do you think that? You have already woken up the guide and received the way of the wind. Based on his tone, he was slightly angered that I had taken the way of the wind that he was supposed to learn. I said with a smile, "I didn't learn it." "Why, there wasn't enough time." "I'm actually glad." "No, I don't have talent." I could feel Yu Jonghyuk's deep contempt in his silence. "You from the beginning. There are people." The moment I heard Han Soo-young's words, I raised unbroken faith. It was the territory of one of the 10 evils, so the people would naturally belong to their group. I entrusted Yu Jonghyuk to Han Soo-young's avatar. "I will be gone for a while, so take him. Do you understand?" The people were getting closer, but something felt strange. Usually it wasn't so loud when a single group moved. Then the clear voice of a woman was heard in front of us. "Everybody run towards Chinho Bridge." It was the Poisoners group. They weren't as powerful as the Wanderer King's group, but some people who survived the Poisoners group were escaping from Gangdong-gu. The unarmed survivors gasped for air when they found us. "Oh, out of the way, hurry." Terrible arrows came flying towards them. The man who spoke to me fell down after being hit by an arrow. The man's back quickly became discolored and blackened. It was poison. "Get those scum." The Poisoners group, dozens of men and women simultaneously fired arrows. The moment we tried to avoid it by moving behind a building, threads of silk spread out in the air. Dozens of webs were arranged at once, causing the arrows to become tangled in the thread and not go any further. Han Soo-young's eyes widened. "What the hell is that technique?" In fact, it was fired from behind the Poisoners group. The thread was like steel wire. The sharpness of the thread caused the legs of people to fly through the air. Quack! All the threads were connected to one woman. The woman wearing a tight black battle suit flew through the air. 2 knives stretched out from the fingers of the woman, brilliantly riding the thread of magic. The woman freely manipulated the length of the thread, and she swept away the Poisoners group in an instant. There wasn't any hesitation in her hand. The movements were beyond beautiful. The combination of stats and skills showed that she didn't have an ordinary sponsor. The information of this person can't be read in character list. This person isn't registered in character list. She wasn't even on the character list. Han Soo-young muttered, "Hey, that woman." I knew without her saying anything. It was because this woman was someone I knew. Yu Sangus Si. I hadn't met her in 2 days, yet she was completely different from the girl I knew. Chapter 82, SSS Grade Talent 2. The bodies of her enemies were torn apart whenever Yu Sanga's daggers moved. Amazing! Was this really the Yu Sanga that I knew? There weren't many skills that could show such power against a large group. At the present time, It was probably just armed Fortress Master Gong Pildu's armed zone and Han Suyung's avatar. Yet Yu Sanga was showing such power without such a great skill. How did she become so strong? What was this talent? Yu Zhanghyuk spoke as if he had read my thoughts. She grew faster because you aren't around. You seem to have no aptitude for raising your fellow companions. It is the same with Li Hyun-sung. They grew to this extent because I pushed them in the beginning. Actually, I didn't really believe it, but I wanted to say it. Damn, why did she get stronger when I wasn't around? Why didn't I seem to be much help? Hey, a voice was heard. I nodded at Han Suyung's words. I couldn't be overwhelmed by Yu Sanga forever. In any case, there were many enemies and Yu Sanga was alone. Yu Sanga said this way. Yu Sanga stopped when she heard my words. She clearly hadn't expected to meet me in this place. Han Suyung, please. Han Suyung triggered avatar like she was waiting. Dozens of avatars disturbed the vision of the poisoner's group, and I safely made contact with Yu Sanga. Dokja Sasai, how are you? Let's talk after moving. The group members were chasing from afar. Fortunately, the survivors seemed to have escaped safely through Gangdong Bridge. The problem was on our side. Go back to the high-rise buildings. The most important step is to go up and secure visibility. As expected, Yu Zhanghyuk's judgment was valid. I might have read all of ways of survival, but I couldn't make battlefield judgments like Yu Zhanghyuk. Then Yu Zhanghyuk followed with meaningful words. And that woman, you should be careful of her. Be careful who? Yu Zhanghyuk didn't say anything else. We quickly hid inside a nearby high-rise building. The monsters suddenly flooded the area, probably due to the turmoil, and just narrowly missed our tail. They soon gave up and returned to inner Gangdong. I looked back at Yu Sanga. Yu Sanga Sasai, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine, Dokja Sasai. Yes, I'm also fine. It had only been a few days, but the conversation was awkward. It felt like I was meeting an alumni from high school 10 years after graduation. I looked away from her in her tight battle suit and opened her mouth. I couldn't figure out what to ask. In the meantime, I looked at Han Suyung. Yu Sanga saw Yu Zhanghyuk being carried on the back of Han Suyung's avatar and gave me an unknown smile. Dokja Sasai must have done a lot in the meantime. It was time to listen to a short story. After the absolute throne was smashed, Yu Sanga fell to Gangdong-gu. Fortunately, there was someone who fell with her. Gong Pildu was with you. Yes, Ajasi helped me a lot. Seeing that she was calling him Ajasi, they seemed to have become quite familiar with each other. Where is Gong Pildu? 2 days ago, he was injured while we were fighting the Gangdong-gu group. It was while trying to save me. Many surprising things kept happening today. 10 evils, Gong Pildu risked himself in order to save someone else. Yu Sanga bowed her head and spoke with difficulty. In the end, Ajasi lured them to Han River. Yu Sanga bit her lips and a poisonous expression filled her face. I suddenly realized why Yu Sanga killed the poisoner's group without hesitation. I spoke to comfort her. Gong Pildu is probably okay, don't worry. I had a contract with Defense Master, so I would know immediately when Gong Pildu died. I would be penalized according to the terms of the contract. The fact that there was no reaction meant that Gong Pildu was alive somewhere. Like the poisoner, Gong Pildu was also part of the 10 evils. It wasn't that easy for him to die. Where did you get those clothes and the dagger? This. After separating from Gong Pildu, Yu Sanga found the green meteorite. The green meteorite was a meteorite containing rare items. I checked the items she had. I remembered that there was a meteorite containing these items in the vicinity of Chinho-dong. Ancient Assassin's Dagger. Rich Cat's Leather Suit. Both were excellent S-grade items. The Ancient Assassin's Dagger had the option of increasing damage to distant enemies, while the Rich Cat's Leather Suit increased movement speed the longer the duration of the attack. They are great items. Yes, I'm able to fight well thanks to these items. Yu Sanga smiled, and then the quietly listening Han Suyung spoke up. HRMM, are you sure that's all? Huh. Let's say that you accidentally got the items, but it doesn't make such to have such combat skills with barely any items. Who the hell is your sponsor? How did you raise quick movements or dagger mastery so quickly? It is impossible for the growth to be so fast even with a growth package. Who are you? Me, I am the first apostle. Yu Sanga raised her weapon without speaking. Calm down, Yu Sanga SSI. This person isn't an enemy. Yu Sanga looked at me with disbelief. Are you friends now? We aren't friends. The Chungmuro group members died because of that person. Surely you haven't forgotten. Yu Sanga was the deputy of Chungmuro while I was absent. Therefore her affection towards the Chungmuro members would be much deeper than mine. Han Suyong said, Chungmuro, ah, I see, you are that woman. Yu Sanga narrowed her eyes at the words. Han Suyong smiled and added, Hey Kim Dokja, I'm a bad person but I am also a good judge. She has a big sponsor behind her. You. When I saw her at Chungmuro, she wasn't that strong. Isn't it strange? She can't grow so explosively in such a short period of time, even if she has a narrative grade sponsor. Maybe if she has a SSS grade accelerated growth skill, how can many constellations can provide such support to South Korea? My heart wanted to deny it, but rationally, I knew that Han Suyong was right. There was also Yu Jonghyuk's words from a short while ago. In addition, Yu Sanga had been hiding her sponsor from me. Yu Sanga's troubled eyes met mine. I used to think that Yu Sanga's sponsor was abandoned lover of the labyrinth. The only person who could find the path through the magic room was the person who handed the thread to Theseus in Daedalus, Labyrinth, Ariadne. But as Han Suyong said, it was impossible for her to grow to such a degree with Ariadne's sponsorship. In addition, the movements that she showed while moving through the air in the previous battle was closer to the Hermes walking method than air steps. Ariadne's incarnation couldn't use Hermes' stigma. I was about to open my mouth when something unexpected happened. Haha, everyone, how have you been? Damn it, this timing. I immediately looked out the window. A new Dakibai was floating in the sky. The participants in this scenario are quite hasty. There is still a week before the start of the scenario, and people are already waking up a disaster. Are you curious about the next scenario? It wasn't the level of Bihyung's nonsense, but it was still talking nonsense. Perhaps there was no one in charge, so this low-grade Dakibai took their place. The Dakibai have left their position, so I will be here for this period. Haha. Now have you all eaten your fill? You do know that this event can't be skipped, right? This wasn't good. It was a really bad development. I want to do that, but I won't be a Dakibai if I don't give scenarios. The fact that a scenario was appearing now told me one thing. The sub-scenario, disaster prevention, has arrived. It meant that the outbreak of a disaster was just around the corner. Sub-scenario, disaster prevention. Category sub. Difficulty S. Clear conditions. Unknown powers in Gangdong-gu are trying to hatch one of the disasters. Defeat them and stop the incoming disaster. Time limit 2 hours. Compensation 22,000 coins. Failure, early emergence of the disaster of questions. Since we received the disaster prevention scenario, the poisoners group would have received the defend the disaster scenario. The damn Dakibus were still trying to be part of this unforeseen situation. I looked at the party members and said, it isn't the time for us to fight. Now we have to handle this situation. Han Suyong and Yu Sanga nodded at the same time. The poisoners group was based in Chinhogong of Gangdong-gu. To be exact, it was an area filled with churches and a cathedral. If their purpose was to awaken the disaster early, it was a good choice to choose a religious area. The prayers of those who lost their places would create an environment suitable for hatching the disaster. Han Suyong finished scouting and opened her mouth. The road with the lowest level of terraforming is in the northeast, centered on the base. It is 16 Chinjung Row. If we go this way, we can reach the base in the shortest time, but the defenses are formidable. I nodded. We didn't have time, so we had to go through the fastest way. It's okay. We have to reach that building as quickly as possible. Han Soo-young and Yu Sanga SSI will take the front. Don't fight each other. I understand. Yu Jonghyuk couldn't help right now, so I decided to leave him on the roof of the high-rise building with Han Soo-young's avatar. His role was to watch the battlefield. Yu Jonghyuk didn't express much dissatisfaction. He just gave this piece of advice. If possible, get rid of them before the disaster hatches. Without way of the wind, the initial suppression of the disaster of questions is almost impossible. Of course, I wanted to do that if possible. Let's go. The moment I gave the signal, we jumped down the building. Han Soo-young used Avatar and took the lead. Dozens of avatars jumped onto the road and attracted the attention of the poisoners' group. What? Kill them? As the confused group members chased after the avatars, thin and transparent thread filled the air. Quack. The people chasing after the avatars were caught by sharp threads and their legs were cut off. This wasn't the end. There was another strong thread in the location where the people fell. Their heads were cut off and flew through the air. It was a terrifying double trap designed by calculating the angle of the fall. Han Soo-young clicked her tongue. She is brutal. You aren't someone who should be saying that. Apart from their feelings towards each other, the combination of the two was worth looking at. No, it was very useful. Thanks to their help, I was able to dig into the center of the base while avoiding their surveillance. It wasn't difficult to find the disaster meteorite. It was a huge meteorite over 8 meters high. It emitted an ominous aura and seemed to say, "I am the disaster." Certainly, it felt like the fire dragon was no comparison. If I couldn't stop this disaster, Seoul would surely be destroyed. Then a woman appeared next to the meteorite. She had hair as white as snow. As I saw the lips that were like red flowers on a snowy mountain, I could see Yu Jonghyuk's taste. The cold and glassy eyes stared at me, and I felt a terrible spirit emerge from her body. It made my skin crawl. It was an overwhelming feeling compared to Gong Pildu. I see. Did she also receive the power of the disaster meteorite? Who are you? One of the 10 evils, the poisoner Lee Xiaohua asked. Chapter 83, SSS Grade Talent 3. There were 3 ways to wake up a disaster meteorite. One was to let the meteorite hatch in line with the scenario. The second method was to draw out the power of the disaster meteorite in advance. The third and fastest way was to supply magic power to the disaster meteorite. Dozens of Lee Xiaohua's group members were praying. A faint magic power was flowing out of their bodies into the disaster meteorite. The hatching ceremony. They had chosen the third method. Based on the meteorite's heavy shaking, the disaster would hatch in 30 minutes. I looked at Lee Xiaohua and opened my mouth. Won't you stop, unless you want to die together? What are you thinking? It was strange. In the third round of regression in the original, there was no one foolish enough to wake up the disaster, even if they did borrow the power of the disaster. Yu Jonghyuk must have visited Lee Xiaohua in advance because he knew about it. Stop hatching the disaster meteorite, then I will spare you. Lee Xiaohua looked at me quietly. What if I don't want to? You'll die here. Poisoner Lee Xiaohua had an expression of ridicule on her face. Her hands moved, and the humans praying towards the disaster turned towards me at the same time. The 8th grade outside species, lower human Nam Minhyuk, has showed hostility towards you. The 8th grade outside species, lower human Yong Minji, has showed hostility towards you. The 8th grade outside species, lower human Kin Gapple, has showed hostility towards you. Antennae grew on their heads and their hands turned sharp like rakes. These wanderers seemed to become transformed humans rather than wolves. There was a worrisome point. It is strange. Isn't transforming humans the power of the disaster meteorite? I murmured at the same time that Lee Xiaohua shouted, "Die!" The loyalists leaped into their air, their wings spreading out. I aimed the hilt towards them. Blade of Faith is activated. The special option of Unbroken Faith is activated. The ether property is converted to fire. White flames split apart the air. All species with insect properties were weak to fire. The ether flames of unbroken faith spread to the skin of the lower humans. 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Kiyek. The flames burned the skin of the lower humans. I cut off the legs and wings of the lower humans. Kiyet. Magic power gushed out and burned the lower humans in a flash. It was the same in the case of the werewolves. They walked a path other than human, and I didn't receive a penalty from killing them. I broke through the flames and ran towards Li Xiaohua. For the first time, unbroken faith was blocked. Li Xiaohua's fingernails and forearms were tinged with a dark light. The power of the disaster increased the level of the stigmas. By borrowing the power of the disaster, her poisonous nails could block the blade of faith. However, that didn't mean she could prevent all damage. Kuek. Sparks flew and Li Xiaohua's body was pushed back a few steps. It would be strange if this didn't happen. My current overall stats were the highest among all incarnations apart from Yu Zhanghyuk. I might have no talent, but I wasn't weak among the incarnations. Give up. It won't be good for you if the disaster hatches now. Doesn't this sub-scenario have no penalty for failure? Li Xiaohua looked towards the disaster meteorite nervously. There was a change in the atmosphere. It felt like she was aiming at the disaster, rather than power from the disaster meteorite. It was strange. Even a person who didn't read the original novel would expect Soul to be destroyed when a disaster hatched. Then why did she want to wake up the disaster? The exclusive skill, character list, is activated. Character information. Name Li Xiaohua. Age 26 years old. Constellation support. Guam Divine Doctor. Guam equals pen name of Hyo Jun, court physician who wrote Dongui Bagem, a medical text that showed up in a previous chapter. Private attribute. Competent physician rare, master of poison rare. Exclusive skills. Weapons training LV. 7 love affair demon LV. 4 emit deadly poison LV. 5 new poison preparation LV. 4 counteract poison LV. 5 stigma deadly poison LV. 4 thousand spirits poison LV. 4 crossroad of life and death LV. 3 overall stats physique LV. 44 plus 10 strength LV. 42 plus 10 agility LV. 44 plus 10 magic power LV. 35 plus 10. Overall evaluation. The current comprehensive evaluation is currently in progress. This character is currently infected with a parasite. The parasite is controlling the body of the character. Some of parasite antinus stats will be transferred to the character. Damn, I didn't think her condition would be like this. Due to the effect of your exclusive attribute, the memory effect of some scenes have increased. In my head, pages flipped, and the sentences of some pages flowed over my retinas. There are 5 dominant species in the world of Chronos: the Velkia in the east, the parasites in the west, the Immunter in the south, and the Misthalin in the north. Finally, the Inba in the center. I avoided the poisonous attack and kicked her back, causing her to lose her balance. Li Xiaohua rolled around the ground and groaned. I watched Li Xiaohua and opened my mouth. The 5th scenario is a scenario where the disasters of Chronos was made into a motif. Li Xiaohua's eyes shook as she heard disasters of Chronos. On the day that Chronos was destroyed, the 5 dominant species of Chronos elected one hero from each species. The 5 chosen heroes shamefully survived the destruction and carried on Chronos' path. They were sent to another through a contract with the star stream. They came to that world, encountered other species, and promised their lives in exchange for stopping the disaster there. A non-human cry emerged from Li Xiaohua's mouth at the story. They were called guides. Kit, how does a human of Earth know such things? How did I know? I knew because I saw it in a book. You aren't Li Xiaohua. The disasters were hatching faster than the original. There were no humans who would do such a thing. Parasite Queen Antinus. Why is a guide trying to wake up the disaster? Only a fallen guide would dream of such a thing. The fifth-grade parasite Antinous is looking at you. Parasites were a parasitic species that lived through other species. Now Li Xiaohua was being manipulated by one of the guides. I looked at the dead bodies of the lower humans. Just like with Lycaon's meteorite, it wasn't the power of the disaster, but the power of Chronos, guide that promoted the human transformation. Why are you infecting the humans here? Why are you doing this? Kiek. What do you get for waking up the disaster early? Isn't the purpose of the guides to prevent the disaster along with the people of this world and unite with us to build a new world? Why are you trying to destroy the terraformed world? Kigikigikiko. This is an act that violates your mission. It isn't too late, so get out of her body right now. Do the right thing, guide Antinous. If possible, I didn't want to kill Li Xiaohua. Maybe Yu Zhanghyuk would do the same. The poisoner became one of the 10 evils after being infected by the parasite. Li Xiaohua might not be one of the 10 evils if the infection was removed. It was why Yu Zhanghyuk's conversation didn't work. He tried to protect his old lover from the parasite queen. The messages of the midday tryst blinked in the air. Kill her. It was Yu Zhanghyuk. The important thing isn't her life but the survival of this world. Act wisely, Kim Dokja. Due to the far distance, I couldn't see what Yu Zhanghyuk's expression was like. He had to worry about this world rather than the woman to whom he once gave his affection. Maybe this was the nature of a hero. I said, then you will be unhappy. It doesn't matter. Yu Zhanghyuk's voce was steady and firm, but I knew, if Li Xiaohua died here, Yu Zhanghyuk would someday collapse. Kiyet. The deaths of his acquaintances would pile up, gnawing at Yu Zhanghyuk's memories and making his mind weary. Kit, you are just a human. The parasite queen spoke through Li Xiaohua's mouth. Hatred for humans was ingrained in her tone. In fact, I knew why she hated humans so much. However, the situation wasn't relaxed enough for me to think about her feelings. Kit Dai. Black liquid started to flow from Li Xiaohua's body. The 1,000 spirits poison. This was when Li Xiaohua's talent started to be shown off. Black liquid shot from her fingernails towards me. I took a few steps back while the 1,000 spirits poison melted the ground. If Yu Zhanghyuk was an ordinary incarnation, he would have already become like this ground. Yu Zhanghyuk asked, do you have a countermeasure to the 1,000 spirits poison? I do. I also wasn't an ordinary person. Strictly speaking, I wasn't an incarnation. Li Xiaohua's poison spread through the air towards me. It felt like it had its own will as the poison freely moved through the air and found my weakness. A few drops splashed on my thighs and then my forearms. A part of the suit hit by 1,000 spirits poison started to melt. A satisfied smile appeared on Li Xiaohua's face. However, this was an early judgment. I ran through the poison and punched her hard in the belly, throwing her back. Kiyayat. She flew through the air with a terrible cry. My skin touched by the 1,000 spirits poison showed some discoloration, but it soon returned to its original color. Li Xiaohua was upset. Kick, the 1,000 poisons resistance. Horror was in her eyes. 1,000 poisons resistance was the terror of all beings who used poison. However, I didn't have 1,000 poisons resistance or immunity to 10,000 poisons. Antinous, you don't know the sponsor behind your host. I put my hand in my pocket. That's why you do know. You don't know, but I'm sure it's inside that body. Right. After a while, a book appeared in my hands. A constellation worried about the degradation of Oriental medicine has revealed his own modifier. The constellation, Guam Divine Doctor, looks at you with amazement. Kiyeta. Dongui Bagam unfinished book. It was one of the greatest Oriental medicine records of the East. The Dongui Bagam was an item that appeared in the 5-person dungeon during the king's qualifications. I had a hard time collecting this. During the king's qualification scenario, all the kings were frantically trying to get the 4-yin demonic beheading sword. While the kings coveted the 4-yin demonic beheading sword, I picked up other items. Many items were thrown away because they didn't know their value. Among them, I was interested in the Dongui Bagam. Internal Medicine, 4th Part. External Medicine, 4th Part. Various Diseases, 11th Part. Remedies, 3rd Part. Acupuncture, 1st Part. Table of Contents, 2nd Part. It was a star relic that could be completed after 25 parts were collected. Unfortunately, I only collected 8 pieces, but that alone was enough to see an effect. Even if I only collected 8 parts, the Dongui Bagam had the effect of the S-grade immunity to poison bead. The effect of the Dongui Bagam, incomplete, has been activated. Your body has temporarily gained the poison resistance ability. The baffled Li Xiaohua shouted. How? The Thousand Spirits Poison. I know. Thousand Spirits Poison is a poison that can't be counteracted with ordinary poison resistance, but it is possible for the Dongui Bagam. Why do you think that is? The constellation Guam Divine Doctor is smiling faintly. One constellation faintly glowed as if in response. It is because the constellation who made the Thousand Spirits Poison is the author of Dongui Bagam. Chapter 84, SSS Grade Talent 4. The greatest good person can turn into the worst killer at any time. This was a sentence that described Guam Divine Doctor in ways of survival. Guam Divine Dr. Hyo Jun. According to the records in Ways of Survival, the task that Hyo Jun devoted his last years to wasn't medicine but poison. Like many great people who later became constellations, Hyo Jun reached a level beyond the actual history records. If I make a poison that can kill anyone, I can make a pill that can save anyone. Hyo Jun was banished after the death of King Seonjo and devoted his last 7 years to this question. Why was poison a medicine for some people and a poison for others? One day in his last years, he finally reached a mystical answer. It isn't the body but the spirit that determines the action of the poison. A poison made by analyzing 1,000 souls. The result was the heavenly poison that flowed out of Li Xiaohua's body, the Thousand Spirits Poison. Dongui Bagam was actually written from Hyo Jun's failure to reach Thousand Spirits Poison. Kiek. I moved through the Thousand Spirits Poison and dealt a merciless blow to Li Xiaohua. Li Xiaohua flew through the air. It wasn't hard to defeat Li Xiaohua if her poison was disabled. It was the Thousand Spirits Poison that solidified her reputation as one of the 10 evils. If I hadn't got the Dongui Bagam, I would have become a sacrifice of her reputation. This time her luck was bad. The constellation Guam Divine Doctor is looking at you like he is sorry. The constellation Guam Divine Doctor is looking forward to you dealing with this properly. 300 coins have been sponsored. The parasite infection was irrelevant to Guam Divine Doctor's intentions. In other words, Li Xiaohua's attack on me wasn't according to Li Xiaohua's will. By the way, only sponsoring 300 coins. The constellation see, I ill pill you dealing with this properly. The constellation Bald General of Justice expects you to do your best. 300 coins have been sponsored. I ignored the response of the constellations and approached Li Xiaohua. Li Xiaohua crawled across the ground with fear. I could feel Yu Zhonghyuk's gaze in the distance. Yu Zhonghyuk would probably be hurt badly if Li Xiaohua died here. I looked at the fallen Li Xiaohua and opened my mouth. Hey. To be exact, I spoke to Parasite Antinous inside her. It would be good if you come out. Kick. It isn't too late now. Return to your duties as a guide, teach people skills and get along with them. If you work hard, maybe you can become a constellation one day. The Parasite Queen, Antinous, was a strong hero. It wasn't possible for her to exert all her strength because she was restricted by the probabilities. It wasn't impossible for her to become a constellation if she continued to be a guide and accumulated history. You humans I hate. The problem was that she thought of humans as enemies. It was also a mortal enemy. I glanced at the disaster meteorite that was intermittently shaking. I am sorry that your world was destroyed, But is it necessary to destroy this world? Are you going to reproduce the same tragedy here? All of you will die. I watched the smiling Antinous and sighed. If she didn't go out on her own, I would have to force her out. In fact, I didn't want to use this method. It wasn't just due to the pain Li Xiaohua would go to. I didn't want the burden of dealing with Antinous after she left the body. I glanced up at the sky, the constellations of the Korean peninsula. I owed them a debt last time, so this time I had to make a concession. The special option of Dongui Bagam, incomplete, has been activated. Dongui Bagam, incomplete, has conveyed the essence of Oriental medicine to you. I had an incomplete version of Dongui Bagam, so I couldn't do miracles like making a powerful poison or saving a dying person. However, I could do simple treatments. For example, taking a parasite out of a body. Her body had to be bound for a smooth treatment, so I held Li Xiaohua's arms from behind, holding her to the ground. It was a misleading position, but her consciousness was buried deep inside her. Common sense told me not to go after Yu Zhonghyuk's ex-girlfriend unless I was a madman, especially in front of Yu Zhonghyuk's eyes. The exclusive skill hit a pressure point LV2 is activated. I started to press at different pressure points on Li Xiaohua's body. Soon after, her skin turned red, and I planted a needle made of magic power into her reacting blood. It was my first time doing this, so I didn't know if it would work. Kiet, it hurts, it hurts. Li Xiaohua howled loudly. I ignored her and kept pressing the pressure points. Kiet kitit kairak. Then Li Xiaohua's screams gradually changed. It changed from the cry of an insect to a human voice. The mysterious thing was using Oriental medicine to remove a parasite from the body. I was embarrassed that a person who had relied on Western medicine so far was now practicing Eastern medicine. The essence of Oriental medicine is effective. The constellation, Guam Divine Doctor, is looking at you with a warm expression. I got up while Li Xiaohua gasped for breath. Yellow mucus was flowing from the glands in her body where poison had been secreted. The mucus was the main body of a parasite. KQOK. This would have satisfied the constellation. The constellation, Guam Divine Doctor, thanks you for your good deed. 500 coins have been sponsored. Li Xiaohua's eyes slowly opened. Consciousness had returned to her eyes, but there was still no focus. It was because she had been infected with a parasite not long ago. She wouldn't be able to see my face right now with her 5 senses half dead. Who are you? I was well aware of the events that would happen if I answered this question. A similar thing happened when Yu Zhonghyuk saved Li Xiaohua in other rounds. That's why the important thing wasn't my identity. I was sent by Yu Zhonghyuk. Kim Dokcha, don't do anything unnecessary. Yu Zhonghyuk's angry voice pierced my ears. Li Xiaohua's expression changed. Yu Zhonghyuk, who is that? You will soon find out. Poisoner Li Xiaohua had to become part of Yu Zhonghyuk's group. After the prophets appeared and the absolute throne broke, the flow of this world was slowly changing from what I knew. It was difficult to make the mistakes of the original, but it was also hard to see the future that I didn't know. That's why it was necessary to balance the important events directly. Some things flowed the same while others flowed differently. There were twists and turns, but in any case, I thought that this round was approaching the ideal approximation that I was thinking of. And the poisoner, no, immortal Dr. Li Xiaohua could be one of the greatest set points of this approximation. Kim Dokcha, this side is done. I turned around and saw Han Suyong and Yu Sanga approaching this way. Amazing. The two of them swept up that many people. It might be a situation where the poisoner was missing, but they were still the poisoner's group. The original plan became meaningless. The two of them might be comparable to Li Jihai's ghost fleet and Gong Pildu's armed zone. Wait, don't come over here. I had to restrain their movements. It was difficult if they didn't have immunity to being infected. This fight hadn't ended yet. Kiet human. The mucus that escaped from Li Xiaohua's body gathered in a ball at one point in the air. Parasite Queen Antinous. She was scary in parasitic mode, but even scarier when she didn't have a host. The mucus moved like a small bug and formed a shape. It was a body made of nutrients that had been absorbed for many years. It was a body with beautiful curves and solid muscles. She had dragonfly-like wings and a tail that resembled a scorpion. She was covered in an insect's shell apart from the face, but she looked more like a bipedal creature than an insect. The real battle started now. Get away before you are infected. The sharp tail aimed for my stomach. The effect of the Dongui Bogem, incomplete, has been activated. Your body is immune from a parasitic infection. It was so fast I couldn't avoid it despite having over 50 agility. I narrowly caught the tail before it pierced me, but if it hit, I would have definitely got a hole in my stomach. Kick. She used the fact that I was holding her tail to fly towards me and hit me. I was knocked onto the ground, and a strong pain filled my body. Strong, she became even stronger when she wasn't in a host. The power of her main body was comparable to a 5th-grade insect king species. Once Antinous unleashed her fighting power, it was equivalent to the degraded fire dragon I once killed. It might be destroyed, but she was still the hero of her world. She was as strong as Lycaon, who emerged from the yellow meteorite. This didn't mean I had no chance. It was a clear violation of the scenario rules for the guide to cause such an uproar before the 5th scenario ended. It wasn't just killing a few people. She even tried to hatch a disaster, which meant she had given up on her probability. The sign of a probability storm was already descending on Antinous' body. As time passed, the collapse of her body would accelerate, even if I didn't attack. It was a fight I could win if I just bought time. Kiet. The problem was how much time I could buy before dying. At this moment, the protection symbol of the immunter started shaking. Ah, that's right, there was this. I held my aching body and said to her, "I'm sorry, but I'm not your opponent." As I spoke, a flash of silver light crossed the sky, causing a sonic boom. The gorgeous mane scattered in the air as something landed in front of me with a loud roar. The being was over 3 meters tall. Lycaon, Prince of the Immunter, stood up. "I'm sorry for the delay, Protector." Chapter 85, SSS Grade Talent 5. Prince Lycaon of the Immunter paid respect to me, before immediately turning to look at Antinous. I couldn't feel reassured because the other world species were companions. Antinous. Lycaon. What the hell is this? The queen of the parasites just laughed. Have you forgotten your mission? Why are you fighting the humans of this world? Kikik mission, was there something like that? Lycaon's expression became determined at her teasing tone. We are the guides. We have to tell the people of the other worlds the right way to face the disasters that are coming. You have already been spellbound by the Dakibus. Wake up, Lycaon. You are the one who needs to wake up Antinous. Lycaon's voice was furious. Have you forgotten the sacrifice of the Chronos warriors? Have you already forgotten the moment when the 5 ruling species was destroyed? We are here to stop the disasters. Work with the species here to defend the terraformed planet and rebuild Chronos, civilization in this world. It is our sacred mission. Rebuilding Chronos civilization. Antinous no longer laughed. Lycaon, it is impossible. This planet will perish. It is the fate of the scenario. No, this time will be different. Lycaon glanced at me. The Protector has stopped a disaster before all the disasters woke up. He has the medallion of my people as proof. Perhaps there is a way to prevent the destruction. If it was a deteriorated disaster, we could have stopped it at any time. Earth is now only in the 5th scenario. There is no planet that has stopped a disaster before the 5th scenario began. Think about it, Antinous. There is still hope for this planet. Antinous' compound eyes slowly blinked. The cry of an insect was boiling inside her. Her cry was full of anger. Don't be so arrogant. You came here to stop the disaster. If you really wanted to help them, why didn't you start when the disaster's destination was set to Earth? That. Han Soo-young quietly approached me while listening to their story. These guys, what are they saying now? Han Soo-young didn't know the details of this scenario. The guides didn't have such an in-depth conversation in the original third and fourth regression. Now they were talking about something vague. Antinous continued speaking. Lycaon, you are like me. We came to this planet for revenge. We will return the same disaster to those who brought us the disaster. If you do that, you will die. The probability of the star stream won't forgive the guide for going against it. Antinous laughed. Lycaon, I died with my kind on Kronos. It doesn't make sense. Lycaon exposed his fangs. Antinous, the conversation ends here. Kikikik, Lycaon, poor wolf of the immunter. Have you forgotten the history of Kronos? The wolf has never once won against the insects. The battle between the prince of the wolves and queen of the parasites began. Gyararararar. Lycaon roared. The flow of ambient air was different. Some winds were fast while some winds were slow. Sometimes there was no wind and sometimes it was strong wind. I'm not the immunter you knew. The winds in the surrounding area started to press on Antinous. Lycaon was finally showing his way of the wind that had evolved one step. Key interesting. I'll check to see how your way has grown. Antinous was the first one to move. The air barrier created by way of the wind and Antinous' tail hit each other. Sparks filled the air and the sound of leather tearing was heard. Han Soo-young and I looked up at the sky, spellbound for a moment. This was the fight between fifth-grade species. It was the confrontation of those who showed a superior physical superiority to humans. Antinous quickly made her way through the gaps in the atmosphere and arrived in front of Lycaon. Antinous' tail underwent an external transformation into a wedge and rushed to Lycaon. It was only one attack, but it could mean the difference between defeat and victory. But at this moment, Antinous' movement slowed down. It was like a repulsion force was pushing at her tail. Kid. On the other hand, Lycaon's movements were slightly faster. His attacks suddenly accelerated. Antinous' tail struck empty air. The fifth-grade species, Parasite Antinous, has activated Accelerating Wings LV. 8. Antinous' wings spread open and vibrated before she disappeared. The S-grade movement skill, Accelerating Wings. Her wings flapped thousands of times per second, and she instantly appeared in front of Lycaon, as if she had teleported. Antinous' arms turned to scythes and flew towards Lycaon's back. The fifth-grade species, Parasite Antinous, has activated Praying Mantis Breakthrough LV. 8. The accelerated scythe struck the atmosphere wall, causing a terrible burst of noise. It was so fast that it seemed like even Lycaon couldn't avoid it. Even so, Lycaon evaded. At the decisive moment, Antinous' attack slowed down while Lycaon's movements accelerated. It was the difference between life and death. Antinous' compound eyes blinked with surprise. Usanga asked with surprise, "What type of technique is that?" "Instant acceleration." "No, that is the way of the wind." "The secret technique of the immunter, way of the wind." At first glance, the two of them seemed to change speed, but this was actually Lycaon's ability. The surrounding atmosphere flowed according to Lycaon's will. "Kit, this damn wind." Antinous also noticed. There was wind on the path that she moved. Antinous was caught in the wind and Lycaon used the wind. It was a skill that controlled the movements of Accelerating Wings while avoiding Antinous' Praying Mantis Breakthrough. The roads made of wind could be used for evasion or to attack. This was why I needed this skill. If I learnt Way of the Wind, I could replace the necessary skills with that one skill. Lycaon roared. "Queen of Insects, kneel in front of the wind." The wolves of the wind. The sharp claws of the wind tore at her wings, while a gale-like kick hit her abdomen. His blow was filled with the wind's acceleration and struck the upper part of Antinous' shell. Kayak. Antinous lost half of her wings and she fell down. Perhaps if it wasn't for the enlightenment I gave him, Lycaon wouldn't have been able to defeat Antinous now. I thought it was only good for others, but it turned out to be helpful for me. The sign of a probability storm on Antinous' body became stronger. "Kiyit, it won't end like this." Antinous attempted a landing with half her wings. "Kimdaksha, kill her quickly." I was already running towards Antinous when I heard Yu Jonghyuk's voice. Blade of Faith is activated. It was possible to be caught up in her probability storm, but that wasn't important right now. My world, my race, my children. She was heading in the direction of the disaster meteorite. The cost of destroying my world, I will absolutely make you pay it. She shot all her magic power towards the disaster meteorite. Lycan ran to block the magic power, while I swung the fire property blade of faith towards Antinous' neck. The insect's mouth became a smile of ridicule. Was it blocked? I turned my head and saw Lycan's pale face. GRRR protectors, sorry. Then all sound disappeared. Light burst from the disaster meteorite and a huge explosion struck me. One of the fragments of the exploded meteorite struck my head. The world shook. Lycan flew away from the explosion. The guide couldn't withstand the force of this disaster. It was impossible to rewrite the history of defeat. The balance of the world was collapsing. You have failed to clear the scenario. The disaster of questions has come to your world. My vision darkened, and I was buried under a pile of shattered building fragments. I barely came to my senses when Yu Jonghyuk's voice rang in my ears. Kim Daksha, wake up, hurry. Recover your spirit. Get moving, now you can still stop the disaster. I honestly thought it was too much. I didn't have way of the wind and the disaster of questions had hatched. It was better to consider a different route than to carry out a suicide attack. Yu Jonghyuk opened his mouth like he read my mind. Are you that weak? What? All the words you told me were false. I reflexively raised my body. This bastard. The one who told me not to give up on this world will succumb to a disaster of this degree. Laughter emerged. I had to hear this from Yu Jonghyuk, not anyone else. Suicide wasn't enough to get rid of the shame. Of course not, I was just thinking for a second. The damn Yu Jonghyuk was right. It was too early for me to say that was impossible. I emerged from the pile of building fragments. The 8-meter-tall disaster meteorite had split in two. It was obvious that something had hatched from it. I looked around quickly, but couldn't see the disaster. Hey, this is. Han Suyong approached me with a restless expression. I couldn't see Yu Sanga, then I heard a voice. This place. There was a boy around a dozen steps away. He looked like a high school student. He was completely naked without a stitch of clothing. The boy muttered. This is perhaps. The boy stretched and looked around like he couldn't believe it. I listened to his murmurs and thought that I had to kill him right now. However, my body couldn't move. An early hatching has weakened the disaster of questions. Due to the early hatching penalty, you won't be able to attack the disaster of questions for 3 minutes. Damn it. We were the ones being penalized. That Dakibai scum, what was he doing? The boy walked around the area and arrived in front of a woman nearby. It was a woman who was part of the poisoner's group. The boy shouted in a clear voice towards the woman. Woman, hey, are you okay? You are who? Excuse me, can I ask you something? No, she shouldn't answer that question. I wanted to shout, but my voice didn't come out. Where is this place? What year is it now? Why all of a sudden? Are you asking me a question back? The boy's strange tone seemed to bewitch the woman. This is Seoul and the current year. A system message was heard the moment the woman answered. The first question has been resolved. The first seal of the returnee, Myung Ilseng, has been released. What is that? The boy laughed wildly at the confused woman and asked, Do you know how much I suffered? Do you know? Have you lived for 100 years? In a place where I was the only human, do you know that there are other dimensions? Other dimension. Disgusting insects, werewolves and bird people, I have a problem. Can you guess what it is? The confused woman shut her mouth. The boy asked, Insects, wolves, birds. Which of these 3 races are the best? What the best? Once the woman asked, the boy laughed like he was dying with joy. It was a creepy laugh. Then, who among the 3 has the most delicious meat? I listened to the disaster of questions and thought, yes, it might be natural that Antinous wanted to destroy Earth. It was because a human of Earth destroyed her world. The woman didn't answer the boy's question. Please spare me. There was a sound and the woman's head flew away. The boy chuckled and looked around. Now there is this development. What a S-grade incarnation. Those scum are squeezing this kid. It is also a heavy-duty alliance. No wait before that. The early hatching penalty has ended. The power that controlled your movements has disappeared. Shit, it was too late. I was about to yell when the boy disappeared and moved to a remote location. Unfortunately, it was a place where another woman was standing. Haha, Nuna is pretty, yes. I cursed. Usanga, avoid him. Usanga raised her dagger and asked cautiously, "Who are you?" The boy grinned at the question. "Are you curious?" The boy's hand grabbed Usanga's chin at a speed that couldn't be seen. "Should I tell you?" One of the 5 disasters that destroyed Kronos, the disaster of questions. He was a returnee of Earth transferred back to this world.